Stalker 2 Heart of Chernobyl delivers one of the most enthralling open-world settings in recent memory that is both rewarding and unnerving to explore. Stalker 2 Heart of Chernobyl is the type of game that rewards the patient player, not just because this is a much-anticipated sequel to a trio of PC classics fans have been waiting 15 years for, but also because its world is one that demands to be explored at a slower pace. Treat this like any other gung-ho FPS and you're guaranteed to have a tougher time than intended. However, approach it with a tolerant attitude and a willingness to soak in all that the zone's absorbing and oftentimes unsettling atmosphere has to offer, and Stalker 2 is an infinitely rewarding survival shooter experience. The first thing to mention is that despite the 2 in the title, Stalker 2 Heart of Chernobyl is a mostly standalone experience that is a great entry point for newcomers. Aiding this is the fact that you play as an all-new Stalker character, Skiff, who suddenly gets caught up in the political web of the zone's various factions, dangers, and intercommunal disputes after being double-crossed at the beginning of the game. Overall, I wouldn't say that Stalker 2's story is anything special, but as an excuse to venture through the radiated zone's various regions and endlessly plunder for newer, better gear, it does a good enough job pulling you through over the course of 40 or so hours. Not to mention that GSC Game World has long-time Stalker lore enthusiasts covered by including returning characters such as Scar, Strider, and the like. The map in Stalker 2 is absolutely massive, to the point that I initially found myself intimidated. From your first quaint opening base located in the central lesser zone to the makeshift tower block of Slag Heap, every area of the zone is jam-packed with micro-stories I couldn't help wanting to delve into further, if only to learn more about the status of the zone since we last saw it, and also Skiff's place within it. True, at times, side missions can swiftly fall into a deluge of go here, do this style fetch quests, but what separates Stalker 2 from your average open world game is the way it always dresses them up with interesting choices to make, unexpected scenarios to take in, and unique sights to see when you get there. A good example of the game's surprisingly emergent nature is the instance I was asked to retrieve a Stalker and take out the Monolith cult member who had kidnapped him, only to find the latter resentful of his actions. It was an unexpected conclusion that forced me to make a murky moral decision. Do I take him out myself, let him live, or leave him to be hunted by whatever else is out there? A lot of both main and side missions share certain similarities with most Bethesda-developed games in this regard, except that in Stalker 2, the destination almost always winds up being just as thoughtful as the journey. If you take into account how many missions can be ended prematurely by firing your gun at the correct NPC, Stalker 2 offers a good degree of freedom regarding the kind of Stalker you want to be. Speaking of which, I can't say that I ever really looked forward to gunfights in Stalker 2, but this is actually a good thing. Occasions when you're required to infiltrate a dilapidated building or underground facility pop up more than you think, and while trying to do so, I found that the enemy AI can be especially cunning, spotting me from far off distances and sometimes peppering me with grenades. This, coupled with how your health can deplete extremely quickly in the early game, can make bouts against human enemies fun and frustrating in equal measure, let alone against mutants. However, I honestly didn't mind combat sections due to how they helped reinforce the zone's overall harshness and what other Stalkers are willing to do to survive. I barely made it through most shootouts, but I can see how this won't be for everyone. Of course, in addition to managing your hunger, stamina, and radiation level, Stalker's emphasis on gear and weapons is how it handles progression, because unlike a lot of other open world RPGs today, there's absolutely no skill tree or XP bar present, a fact that forces you to go out and fend for yourself, literally. Luckily, visiting shopkeepers and technicians at a base are good ways to keep your equipment fixed and in good working condition, but it's often costly. Rather, it's encouraged that you plunder ravaged buildings and points of interest for stashes, with the ultimate reward being you gained improved stats and survivability in an incredibly natural way. It really is refreshing. It's obviously no secret that Stalker 2 has been in the oven for a long time, and for the most part, this has paid dividends in terms of the game's visuals. Developed in Unreal Engine 5, at its best, the radiated areas of the zone are a true sight to behold, with orange sunsets and distant vistas being a common sight as the day-night cycle slowly progresses throughout long play sessions. And despite doing a lot of running through it in real time, the lack of fast travel made me appreciate its scenery like few other open world environments I ever have before, and digging into hostile locations and devastated buildings was never a chore due to just how good everything looked. The impressive weather effects alone made watching bouts of thunder crash down a thrill whenever a dangerous emission rolls in. Sadly, Stalker 2 manages to let itself down when it comes to the technical side of things, whether it was how none of my guns made a single sound during my first 5 hours of playtime, how an NPC floated up off his bed before me, or the way missions would only stay tracked if I selected them on the map as opposed to my journal. Bugs of all shapes and sizes were rife during my playthrough. It's yet another way players are asked to be patient. Various patches were even released during the pre-release review period, yet I still bumped into plenty of technical shortfalls. Given the sheer scope of the game, alongside the relatively small team size at GSC Game World though, I'd say this is a case of ambition outweighing polish despite the developers' best efforts. Luckily, no bug ever detracted from my overall enjoyment, and hopefully these issues can be ironed out with a future patch. In many ways, Stalker 2 succeeds in being a bold modernization of GSC Game World's classic survival shooter, packaged and prettied up for today's audience. It's a sequel that also manages to stay true to its in-depth PC roots by retaining an emphasis on resource management, scavenging, and presenting a world that is seemingly as wide as an ocean that's somehow equally as deep. Prevalent bugs and purposefully clumsy gunplay aside, Stalker 2 is an impressive successor worth the decade-and-a-half wait. We at Mirror Gaming give Stalker 2 Heart of Chernobyl a 4 out of 5. Do you plan on checking this one out? Be sure to let us know in the comments section below, and consider subscribing to the Mirror Gaming YouTube channel to stay up to date with even more videos like this. Until next time, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.